Hey everybody, this is Jeremy Tiers from Tutor Collegiate Strategies, and you're about to check out the latest episode of the Mission Admissions Podcast, a show that's designed to help higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and managers. Each week, I'll introduce you to an industry leader or difference maker who will share helpful advice, tips, and strategies that will help you grow professionally and personally. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify podcast network and is made possible by Gecko, an engagement platform that makes it easy for your team to deliver a better student experience. I'm excited to share my latest candid conversations, so let's get started. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 12 of the Mission Admissions podcast. One of the things I've heard a lot of people talk about over the past 12 months is how the pandemic reinforced the importance of community. Community has really become a buzzword across multiple industries, including higher education. So I'm excited to chat today with Christina Garnett, who is an expert at helping brands and people connect with their audience and build community, especially on social media. Christina is a very well-known speaker who is involved in events like Inbound, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and she is also the principal marketing manager at HubSpot. So welcome to the show, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to chat all things community.
A lot of people probably know you, Christina, like I do, meaning I first started following you about a year ago on Twitter. And for those of you that do, you know she's at that Christina G. And I was just immediately drawn in by the genuine excitement I feel like you have for connecting with your audience and just finding ways to bring value without having any sort of sales push or, hey, by the way, Jeremy, I need this from you. So you now have like 50,000 followers on Twitter. How do you think that happened, Christina?
I know exactly how that happened. There's a lot of like growth hacks about like you can do threads and you can do all these things, but I find that if you are just unapologetically human and you use your platform to make things better, I find that makes positive change and that gives people a reason to follow you. My massive growth happened when I made a conscious effort to highlight people who were doing really great work that I wanted to make sure was seen. There's a lot of thought leaders out there who I find are just word salad. They're not really giving any real value. And I could throw stones at those people, but that doesn't do anything. What I can do is I can make the people in the trenches who are doing really great work, I can make them louder. And so as soon as I started, without realizing it, trying to create community and trying to amplify others to make them loud, that's when it started to swell. And so I continue to do that. It's a mixture of if you don't follow me, my Twitter is a mixture of me being a massive dork, sharing my love of Marvel and Star Wars and Tolkien and all these things, but also celebrating the really amazing people in our space who are doing great work, but have their heads down. And so they don't have the time or they don't have the desire to push their voice out there. But I can do that for them.
And I feel like we use words like organic, and things like that. But to your point, I feel like it's when your intent is good.
Yes.
And you really aren't necessarily, okay, I'm going to set out to get 50,000 followers and you just do the right thing. Yeah. I think that genuineness and that intent, talk to us. Do you think intent is pretty important, obviously, I think in anything we do in life, but how important when it comes to building community is just like, do you feel like somebody can sense Christina's intent if they're reading her Twitter feed or yes, if they're watching a video? Thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think anyone that's opened an InMail from LinkedIn can tell you that intent matters. As soon as it's obvious that you only want to talk to me to sell something, I'm out. Yeah. I'm completely out. And so intent is hyper important because as soon as you realize that someone is in it for some other ulterior motive other than to connect people or to create a space that's helpful or provide value, you immediately feel like a pawn in this like greater scheme. And I don't want to be involved in that. And I know others who don't want to be involved in that. So intent matters greatly.
Is intent something you can teach, in your opinion, or is it something, nope, you either just have it in your DNA or you don't? You really kind of can't fake it and hope that people just, somehow buy in.
I think that with our culture, especially our internet culture, I think that it can be taught. The problem is that you have to unlearn hustle culture in order to do that. I think hustle culture is literally the opposite of community and like the positive intent of community. Because hustle culture is very much, I'm going to do all these things and here's end game. And it's all to get to end game. Whereas community, it's more long term. You understand that it's an investment. You probably have goals for it, but they might not be as easily attributable as, say, I want so many followers or I want so much money. That's the thing that I'm seeing is a lot of hustle culture, and we've seen this in Web3. They've kind of capitalized on the trend of community and like, how can I monetize it? And that like breaks my heart every time I hear it. I'm just like, oh, you can make money on community, but it shouldn't be the only reason you're getting into it.
Yeah, and higher education, for those of you listening, it's the exact same way. I mean, I work with so many admissions and marketing teams, and it's like, well, how can we come up with the perfect email or the perfect text that ultimately gets them to apply or gets them to do whatever we need them to do, whether we want whether they're ready to do it or not, we want them to do this. And, I talk all the time about that's usually not what moves the needle. It's when somebody understands, wait, you're looking out for their best interests. You genuinely want to help them, even if that means at the end of the day, they don't end up applying to your college in that example, or they end up figuring out, boy, I thought this school might be a good fit for me, but the more I've learned about it, it just doesn't match with what I'm looking for. And I agree with you. And I think unlearning things is definitely hard, right? For any of us. I get asked about that all the time when I'm speaking, like, Jeremy, how do I start a new habit? And I'm like, you just gave yourself the answer. You just have to start a new habit and then make it a habit, which is hard. So fill in the blank for me then. Building community means what?
I really like how Dharmesh, our CTO, mentioned it at Inbound in his spotlight talk. He talks about how community is connecting those dots and whispering to you like you belong. I find that that's such a really great way to describe it, because that connection is really the difference. That's the difference between audience and community. That's the difference between, because you're not only connecting the brand or whoever is the facilitator of the community to the members, but the members to the members. So you're really kind of building out this web based on commonalities, based on common passions, based on common location or whatever that looks like. But it's the connection is at the heart of it. That's the difference. And that's why I think intent matters, because you only want to connect with people who have an intent that is aligned to yours. And if you can get the right intent and you can create the right connection, then what you're going to have as a byproduct is trust. And that trust is going to open other doors to you.
So then why is community and building it such a struggle for so many people? Are we back to this idea of because people don't have the right intent, or people are so impatient that they just want it yesterday that they can't, understand, like you said, it's a little bit of a longer game? Or is it selfishness? I mean, what is it, Christina, then that causes so many people to struggle when they want to build community?
It's a mixture of all of those, honestly. You have this, especially if you're a brand and you want to build a community, you're going to see it from your perspective. And like you said, you're going to see it based on the behaviors that you want them to do. But that doesn't mean that that's a behavior they're coming into that community to be a part of. There has to be alignment, and that lack of alignment makes things very difficult. Secondly, then you have the intent. You have that intent issue of, I'm going to tell you what I want you to do, and I'm going to tell you why this community, and you're not going to invite people to the community and be like, hey, welcome for coming. You're here because I want to make money off of you. Like, even if your intent is bad, you're not gonna open that door and welcome them and say, hey, gloves are off, here's why you're here, you're gonna make me a ton of money. You're gonna make it sound lovely and fresh and kind and whatever. But then it's not gonna go fast enough for you. As soon as you start building, especially if it's tied into revenue, or if it's tied into money, or if it's tied into, like, for higher ed, if it's tied into like donations or anything like that, it's never gonna be enough. And it's never going to be enough fast enough. So you're just constantly going to be determining whether or not you're doing a good job and the community is a success based on how much money it's bringing in. But that's not the real marker. If those people, you could have tons of people in a community, but they're not engaged because they're not happy. They came in there, they thought it was something different, then they immediately left and never returned. There are going to be some people who will still count those as community members, but they're not active. They're not in there. They came in and made that swift turnaround. The other thing too is a lot of community builders and just people who are new to community building in general, they don't take the time to make sure that they are infusing the voice of the community member in every single thing they do. They'll interview them once and be like, cool, I understand these people. I know exactly what they're doing. And then they never talk to them again. They never do a touch point and say, all right, the world has literally been on fire for 2.5 years. Has anything changed in the last 6 months for you? Are your pain points different? Are you in this community for a different reason now? They're not doing that. Think about how much has shifted in the world since the beginning of 2020. And we'll have communities where we haven't touched or talked to them about how that's impacted them. Or there's layoffs. There's so many layoffs in the tech space right now. You can have people in your community that desperately need an opportunity to be able to look for things, but you don't think about it because you just focused on the behaviors you want them to do. But that's how you lose them. You have to make sure that they're always there, that that voice of the community member is just interwoven in every single thing you do, and be adaptable to understanding that they might go from like a hyperactive member to not active at all. And you might, if you're not paying attention, it might not be a big deal to you. But if you're paying attention, you might need to ask, what happened? Are they busy? Did they lose their job? Did they start a new job? Are they getting divorced? What's going on in their life that they went from someone who's hyperactive in this community and hyper engaged, and now they just kind of disappeared? You need to be paying attention to things like that. Or someone immediately becomes hyper engaged out of nowhere. They were a lurker, more of passive. What happened? And talk to them. That's the thing that still shocks me. Like the whole, there's that fortune cookie marketing of just talk to them. But it's true. Just talk to them. Do those interviews. Ask them those questions. What motivates you? What makes you feel special? What are your expectations of being in this group and being in this community? It's just such an untapped resource.
I don't think I've met a single higher ed professional that loved everything about their technology stack. Here's the honest truth. No CRM or SIS will be able to meet all of the needs of all of your team. And that's why I'm a huge fan of Gecko, a student engagement platform that offers customizable modules designed to complement your institution's CRM and SIS. Gecko offers plug-and-play modules that enable your team to deliver memorable student experiences at scale. Their chatbot and texting tools will empower your admissions team to engage with the highest quality prospects by serving as a front line of defense for prospects that have basic questions about the college admissions process. Gecko's event module makes it easy to create awesome online and in-person event experiences one time and then duplicate them throughout the year with just a couple of clicks. Their call center is also an industry leader. No more splitting call lists into a dozen Excel files, scrolling through data to find who you need to call next, or having to manually record who picked up and who didn't. Oh, and did I mention that everything integrates seamlessly into your CRM and SIS? Because it does. So if you're a Slate school, for example, you'll see all of that sweet interaction data in your student's timeline. If you want to level up how you engage with prospective students, but you don't want to disrupt your processes, rip out all your tech, or start a new CRM procurement process, you need to check Gecko out. You can learn more about their offerings at geckoengage.com/Enrollify. And be sure to tell them that Jeremy and the Enrollify team sent you their way. Well, and to your point, I feel like too many people do it one time and say, oh, good, I don't ever have to do that again. I can just, and to your point, that's the problem, I think. But then unpacking everything you just said, at least in higher education and, when it comes to helping young people or even adults who might be going back and, doing their MBA or whatever it might be, figure this out. So much of it is, well, I just have to get their attention in the first place, right? Even if they're a part of this community, and wait, I might have had their attention 2 months ago, But to your point, now they're all of a sudden not engaging, and I don't understand why. And it's so important to figure out the why. I just sent out my weekly newsletter literally 33 minutes ago, and that was what the article was that I wrote this week was, all right, in higher education speak, we have what are called inquiries, which is a student, just like you would see right on the business side, who's inquired at some point. Great, they were engaged, but like they haven't taken the next step. Well, continuing to remind them with transactional reminders, do this, Christina, isn't going to move the needle. It's, well, what's happened? Why haven't they taken the next step? What are they worried about? What are they wondering about? And so I feel like, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, part of the struggle as well with building community is you're not doing that consistently in terms of engaging with your community. But when you do engage, you don't ask the right questions either.
Yep, 100%. Completely agree. Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, there's also I think that community builders fall into the trap that a lot of marketers do. We immediately try to figure out, all right, as this is, especially as you scale, when you go from like building to scaling, there is this need to, how can we be more efficient and how can we automate and what can we automate? And so we try to push everything towards this more efficient process, but community is a human experiment. There are variables you will never know about that are impacting your community on a micro and macro level. And if you're automating everything, how is it possible for you to infuse humanity in all of this automation? It's very difficult. It's very difficult. People know what a drip campaign looks like. Like I think Gen Z is a really great example of what we're seeing is marketers for years now have known that the consumer is becoming more and more aware of our tactics and our processes to get things done. Gen Z could teach a class on it. And now, and because of that knowledge, because they've grown up with all this technology, they've grown up with this post-Mad Men world where we know what ads look like, we know what you're doing, we know how you're positioning it, we know what like a hyper influencer who's being paid to talk about, to like lovingly talk about a product they've never or would never use. And so Gen Z is like, no, I rebuke all of it. I don't trust any of it. And then the world is like freaking out. Like, how do we reach out to Gen Z and get them talking to us and get them to consume with us? And it's like, you completely forgot about the humanity. They want raw. Like TikTok's a great example of that. They love raw content. They love organic. The messier it is, the more they believe it. It's so indicative of this growing evolution of we don't need the perfect, we don't need the pretty, we need the human. And community is a walking testament to that.
Yeah, humanize, empathize, personalize. I use those words so much. And to your point, how many of those three, right, are you checking every single time you interact in any medium with your community or with another person? Why do you think then marketers in particular, because obviously this is a world you live in and have lived in for a while, why do marketers struggle then with, it's okay to be messy? Is it because, again, it just doesn't align with some of these marketing goals? Or is it what we talked about earlier? No, they've done it this way, and so they now have to relearn and do it another way, and that's just hard for all of us. I mean, any thoughts on that?
It's risk aversion. It's
Okay,
risk
expand
aversion.
on that.
Anytime you have like a brilliant idea that's completely brand new that no one else has done and you try to take it to leadership, any leadership, so this is any company, one of the first things they're going to ask you is, hey, can you give me examples of that? Everyone wants to be first, to say that they're first, but no one wants to be first and put their foot out first and be at risk.
But what about ideas that clearly have been done, right? Like personalization isn't new.
No, personalization isn't new.
But what Gen Z, I would argue, thinks is personalization, to everything you said earlier, is probably different to what me as a 47-year-old thought was personalization, right, when I was 17, 18, 19, 20. So if there are examples out there, I want to help my audience understand, where do you think the disconnect is then, Christina, when it comes to saying, okay, we know what we're doing now isn't working the way we want. We know we want to take these ideas. We know maybe we don't have applicable examples we've done, but there are examples out there.
Yeah.
Is it we're just not explaining it well enough? We're not defining it well enough? I mean, give me any thoughts around any of where you see the speed bump when it comes to innovating or doing something different, especially on the marketing side of things.
I would say lack of diversity in the decision-making room. and lack of the people who can actually speak to the value of that content. There are so many ads and like marketing campaigns that I've seen that have fallen short or have been blasted on social. And it's because they were specifically talking to an audience that no one in the decision room represented. We see this a lot with the Black community. We see this a lot with the non-English speaking community. We see this a lot with Gen Z. Like, you won't even hire a Gen Z and you want to say that they're lazy and they're entitled, and then you want to make an ad to speak directly to them, and it bounces because they're like, you don't know us at all. When you could have easily, same thing, talk to your customers, talk to your community, talk to the people in your company that represent the target audience that you want to talk to. Because even if they don't give you ideas, they can block the stuff that would break you. They'll tell you like, ooh, I would not do this, and here is why I would not do that ad. Or I wouldn't do this, or like, that's not how we talk. That's another weird thing that I've seen is, and I don't think this is a new trend either, is if you look at ads, especially ones with children in them or teens, they always talk the way like a 40 or 50-year-old man thinks a 12, 13, 14-year-old teenager talks. And that's not a now thing. That is like my whole life. Ask them. Pay attention. That's why I think something that's incredibly important across any industry, especially if you're on social and you want to be able to tap into multiple age groups, is having someone, maybe not necessarily terminally online, but someone who understands meme culture, someone who understands current events and understands how to weave appropriate meme and culture moments into the brand. That's absolutely priceless. That's when you know that you're able to jump into a trend and make sense. The trend life cycle is incredibly short. And so having those people on your team who can flag it and say, hey, this is happening in my community. This is something we can jump into, and we can jump into it quickly. Those kind of people are priceless on your team. That's why diversity is so important. Diversity of age, diversity of ethnicity, it's important.
If you work at a college and you're listening to this, you have current students on your campus who are number one, your best asset.
100%.
Well, go and involve them in some of these conversations when it comes to content creation, when it comes to ideas you're thinking about. And the pushback I always hear, Christina, and I'd love your quick thoughts on this, but wait, if we talk down to their level, aka our target audience, that makes us in some way, especially if we work at an institute of higher education, unprofessional. And I'm like, no, it does the exact opposite. It makes you more relatable and believable, which is what your audience needs from you. And I feel like that's such a hard switch for so many people listening to this podcast to flip. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what I would do is I would ask them the question of, how do you want to be perceived? Do you want to be seen as stiff and old school, or do you want to be seen as representative of the students that you want to have? Because the places, especially in higher ed, like, it's the Ivies that are the ones who have that kind of like clout machine of professionalism and all these other things. But even they take time to not take themselves too seriously. If you are choosing professionalism over the connection with your students, you don't deserve their money. You're basically saying, I'm going to choose something other than my students, which is the last thing the students and prospective students want to hear. They want to see people like themselves on campus. They want to know what it's like. Any school's going to have teachers, any school's going to have classes. They want to feel like they can see themselves on campus. And that's not going to be with you being hyper professional. And that doesn't mean you cuss. It doesn't mean that you like go wild. But it does mean that you showcase that you understand them. And if you don't understand them, your students will tell you. Let them play a bigger role. They want to be there. And the thing is that there's already a lot of content out there that's doing this. You can go on TikTok. Like, I think Bama Rush Talk is probably one of the best examples of that. Is you have these sororities in the South, and they're all setting this up. And this has been like traditions. This is like, a lot of it's like quiet traditions that they don't want out there. But there are people who are going to apply to Southern schools because they want to be a part of Rush Talk. They want to be a part of that culture. They want to spend an obscene amount of money doing their dorm bedroom so it looks like something out of like Architectural Digest. But they're choosing because of the content they're seeing from students. And the student content will do better.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. Our shows feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Mickey Baines, Jeremy Tears, Jaime Hunt, Corynn Myers, Jaime Gleason, and many, many more. You can learn more about the Enrollify Podcast Network at podcasts.enrollify.org. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea. Find yours at podcasts.enrollify.org.
There are Southeastern Conference schools, to your point, that I know for a fact have data that students are choosing those schools so they can tailgate at Saturday football games.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Because to your point, it's the culture, community, whatever words we want to use, that they see and go, I want to be a part of that. Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We want to be a part of something bigger, a part of something greater. That's the reason why you go to a massive conference, to meet people that you probably know on the internet. It's the reason why you go to Inbound and you're super excited about it. It's the reason you love going to a massive game and being able to cheer with thousands and thousands of people, or tailgate and have fun before the game. It's why the Tennessee versus Alabama game this weekend, and they're parading the goalpost down Main Street. That's a moment. Those are core memories that you could tap into, but you're too busy trying to be too professional. Give them those core memories. Show them what it's like. The things when you're like 20 years away, like 20 years after you graduate. What would you think about if you came here? What are those memories?
What advice then would you give, Christina, to somebody who's sitting, listening, going, Christina, Jeremy, I agree with everything you're both saying. Here's the problem. I'm a team of one. I'm a team of three. Like, I don't have a videographer who can go capture those moments. I don't have this. Like, what advice would you give them on, all right, well, then here's what you need to do, right? Until, for example, you might have an opportunity to hire another person or, change leadership's understanding of what your needs truly are if you're going to do some of what we've talked about so far.
For a team of one, you're going to have to prioritize. So make a list of all the things you'd love to do, and make basically like a general list of how long you think it's going to take weekly to do those kind of pieces of content or research or whatever that looks like. And then prioritize the things that you think are going to be the lowest lift and the highest impact. That needs to be first. And then you're going to guide through and just keep running. What would you do first? What would you do next? And then look at the content that's already out there. Look for UGC. Go on TikTok. Go on Instagram. Are people already talking about your program, your schools? One of the things I would do is lean into UGC, especially if it's already being created. If there are people taking pictures of your campus, you need to be in their DMs asking if you can share it on your social, or if you can share the picture in an upcoming newsletter, or you'd like to share it on your website or in an upcoming fundraising campaign. Look for UGC that's already being created. Ask for permission. Do not assume. Your students want to feel special, and you asking if they can use that makes them feel special. And then they're going to make sure everyone sees where it's placed, whether it's an email, whether it's a website. Find opportunities to make your students shine. Celebrate them. And then if you have work study, or if you have students who are learning, or if they're in classes for things, if there's an opportunity to do externships and opportunities to learn like on the job while they're doing things, that is a great opportunity for them to also highlight the work they've already done for the school once they graduate. You've given them portfolio work to do. And so think about those like low lifts. So like work study, if you have a work study program at your school, those are really great students to tap into, because 9 times out of 10, those kids are doing data entry work when they could be doing really hyper creative work that could help them in their future career.
And UGC, for those of you listening who might be like, Jeremy, UGC, what do you mean? User-generated content, right? Look at what's out there. I feel like one of the things, again, to your point, that doesn't get harnessed enough is this idea of we have all of these students, for example, on a college campus who are living what we want to show prospective students, So for example, if you're a team of one, you're a team of two or three, and you're listening to this, go find a student. I promise you, you have at least at a bare minimum one or two students on your campus who are really good with video, who love to do it for fun, who, if to Christina's point, you said, hey, we can't pay you even though we'd love to right now, but would you be interested in coming and documenting and doing some B-roll footage type stuff at events and things we do throughout the year, knowing that you can use it in your portfolio when you graduate to show, hey, here's what I helped my school with, right? I feel like that, for example, doesn't get tapped into enough. Do you think something like that would be a good idea?
I think it's great. And I would talk to, especially if you have like a media program or a marketing program at your school, talk to them and see who's looking for opportunities, because a lot of those kids or a lot of those students, they're working on portfolio pieces for school assignments. So if you can't hire, if you can't pay them, which I'm kind of against like unpaid labor, but let's say you can't, is there a overlap where they can not only get it as a portfolio piece, but they could get credit for it in classes? Is there a way for people to do that? If so, especially if you have like a marketing or a media course that's available at your school, look and talk to the professors and say like, hey, we're looking to do something like this. Do you have any upcoming assignments where they could do this for a grade? And then we can use that content, make sure you give the student full credit, just like you would if they were being hired, and then make sure that they're able to put that on their resume, in their portfolio, and all this stuff. Plus they also get graded for it. So there's multiple value in it for them. But also, like I said, if you can tap into internships and work study, I would also recommend that, because I did work study in college, and I would have much rather been creative than do like data entry and admissions. So just saying.
And to your point, that's what I see a lot when I go work with these college campus and senior leadership teams is you have current students doing everything from licking and stuffing envelopes, which again isn't wrong, but also not a lot of fun, right? To doing data entry and other things, when utilizing them, for example, in staff meetings to say, hey, here's some topics that we're thinking about covering, or some events that we're thinking about doing A and B with. What do you think in terms of how we would approach that? And what are things you would tell us to avoid? And just trying to utilize your students in different ways, to your point. I think it's all there. It's just not something that a lot of schools and people are used to doing. And for whatever reason, risk averse, or we don't know what we don't know because we've never done that. We haven't tried it. But yet I would argue you have to try first before you're going to make a decision that it's not going to work, right? So how does building community then fit into a marketing plan? Like when you're designing a marketing plan, Christina, for any business or for a college, like where does community fit? Do businesses need, I know some obviously have a version of this already, but do you think every business needs like a community builder and that's somebody's title and role? Like what do businesses need to do, or what do colleges need to do when it comes to, okay, here's our marketing plan and what we're trying to do. How do we fit in this whole concept of building community and spreading organically all this word of mouth that we know is so important?
I think that for the longest time, community has been really nice to have. And I think as we position away from that trust that we originally had like 10, 20, 30 years ago, that communities are becoming more of a must for brands. Specifically, when you think about how can you connect with them, how can you really drive awareness. So if you're a brand, let's say you're just getting started, you're a startup, you're going to do product market fit. You should also do community market fit. And think about what a CAB or a customer advisory board would look like. For higher ed, what would a student advisory board look like? You kind of already have student government, but what if you had like a micro community of students that are selected, and that's something else they can put on their resume as to they were selected to be a part of this leadership group. And I find that for most brands, a CAB is enough, because it gets you the voice of the customer, and they're able to connect with each other, but you're also able to connect with them to keep you honest, to make sure that you're constantly understanding what your customers are going through. Are pain points changing? Do we need to adapt? If so, how? Things like that. I'd love to see the same things in higher ed for students, so that you can tap into them and say, hey, we have an upcoming brand campaign for the college. Would love to get your perspective on this. Is this stupid? Is this hokey? Would this make you want to come here? Does this reflect the experience of being at this school? having those opportunities and finding moments where they can connect with each other, but also connect with you is incredibly important. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of every business, every brand needs a community and it needs to be massive. That's wrong. That's a lie. There is no like magical number that's like the perfect community. If you have a small community of 10 customers who are helping you guide your marketing strategy and making sure that you're aware of like, is this the right positioning? Is this actually how you're using this product? Is this solving for the problem that you have? It's such an easy way to tap right into and speak to the people that are similar to the ones that you want to target. So keep them close, but then understand that when they talk to other people, that's who people are going to believe. They're going to believe word of mouth. Word of mouth is the one thing in marketing that I can categorically say will never go out of style. Everything's a trend. Word of mouth isn't. Word of mouth is here forever, absolutely forever. And so when you think of community, I want you to think of word of mouth. I want you to think of connection and connectivity. So the short answer is yes, but it doesn't look like what you think it looks like. If you're a business, I would start off with a customer advisory board, just connecting with some customers, interviewing them regularly, finding moments where they can also connect with each other so they can learn from each other and ask questions. Create a safe space so that they feel comfortable asking questions and saying like, hey, I use this for here. Do you use this here? Is that like why you went here? How did you find it? This is how I found it. Having those talk tracks back and forth and creating a space where people can ask questions and feel vulnerable is incredibly important. So yes, you should have it, but it doesn't have to be big.
Pros and cons of having, whether it's that CAB or in the example we've been talking about, student advisory board, right? Having that versus doing multiple surveys throughout the year.
The multiple surveys, what you're going to wind up having is you're going to have paper trails. And you'll be like, we had this email campaign and we did this and we got this many respondents. And it's very much quantitative data. And you can get that from CABs. But I find that CABs are really great for qualitative data. And that's the beauty of community. And I think why a lot of communities struggle is because it's this very beautiful dance between quantitative and qualitative data. And you need both.
110%. We literally, one of the things I'm going to do this afternoon is go through over 20,000 student responses from high school seniors across the country from a recent partner survey we did with another company in higher education. These are all seniors in high school going through their college search right now. And it's so important, I tell people, it's not just about asking, again, quantitative questions. Those open-ended responses are so...
They tell you everything.
Everything. And so it's fun for me, even though some people are like, Jeremy, you're nuts. It's fun for me to go through 20,000, open-ended responses because you see trends very quickly, especially when students know this is an anonymous survey. My name's not to it. If they're telling me I can speak freely, cool, I'm going to speak freely and not think twice about it. But having that ongoing, I think, to your point, is one of the benefits of something like that student advisory board is, all right, you can do a couple of surveys, great, right? But stuff changes. And it's not like you can't figure some of that out, but if you had somebody in real time who was a part of biweekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever it would be, meetings, again, I think you're going to be able to be more adaptable, I would argue, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
As things are going.
Well, there's gonna be some responses in those like free form questions, and you're gonna be like, oh, I wish I knew who this was. I need to ask a deeper question. I want to know more about this. You can't do that in a survey.
That's an excellent point. So if you had to give someone like a 3 or 4 step guide, Christina, in terms of how to begin, all right, building an active and engaged community, like what are those 3 or 4 steps? Where do they start?
I would have them go to community-canvas.org. It's a free one pager. I did not come up with it. It's something, but it's literally like the cornerstone. It's the first piece of advice I give people. Fill it out. Have your leadership fill it out too. It's one page. It's broken down very similarly. It's based off of Steve Blank's business model canvas. So it gets basically your business plan, all the major pieces that you would need in a business plan on one page. Same thing with community. So fill that out. It's going to make you think about the core questions that you need to be considering when you build a community, and then give it to leadership to make sure that they are aligned as well, because a lot of problems start with the community builder. They think they know what should be done. Leadership has a completely different perspective and expectation. And then 6 months, 1 year down the line, the community isn't doing what the business wanted it to do. And so it either falters or it changes swiftly, or the community builder leaves or is fired. And it's all because there's that lack of alignment. So community canvas, 100%. So step 1. Then step 2, do community market fit. Determine if this community already exists. If so, where does it live? Do you want to strategically work with them? Or do you want to build your own thing? Who is this for? What are their needs? And you get all that information by talking to them. You have to do market research and do it in multiple ways. Do surveys, do face-to-face, talk to the people who are interested in coming to the school, talk to your current students, talk to your alumni. That's another thing. If I can leave one thing on this call, don't just talk to your alumni when you want money. It makes us all angry. We'll give you the money, but act like you care about us outside of that. Ask us for hey, we have an upcoming campaign, and we'd love for you to share your favorite moments from college. Do you have any pictures that you want to share that we could do a Throwback Thursday campaign? Ask for UGC, ask for content, ask for their favorite memories from college. But when you only talk to us when you want to check, you're telling us what our relationship means to you. So pre, during, after, talk to all of them. What do they want? What do they need? How can things be better for them? 3, make sure that you keep the student's voice or the voice of the student with you at all times. If the community is for them, then build it with them. What would their expectations be for being in the community? What do they hope to gain? How would they need to feel, or what would need to happen for them to feel like they belong, like they feel appreciated, like they're not some stupid person in a Slack channel? And then 4, remember that it's human. And remember it's going to change. And it's going to change based on time of year. It's going to be changed on school cycle. It's going to be changed on if someone's parents are getting divorced and you don't know, or someone just got a new scholarship and so now they don't have to work a second job off campus. All these little things. What you have on the campus is already a community. It's how can you tap into it and create more of an organized structure. So just keep it human and remember that all those individuals, they have their own burdens. They have their own struggles. They have their own need for connection and why they're looking for and where they're looking for it. So make sure that you're continuing to tap into the humanity of it. That's it.
And giving an applicable example for all of you listening to what Christina just said, you have all these different communities on your campus, to her point. First generation, out-of-state students, students of color, all these different communities you're also trying to obviously bring more of to your campus and grow. One of the things we do, and you can all do this if you're listening on your own, every single month, one, if not more communications that get sent to different groups of prospective students have the student voice in it by using direct quotes from students to back up a point that's being made, and not a perfectly put together direct quote, right? It's okay to start a sentence with and or but. It's okay if a student had a ... to leave it in there. You don't need to edit all of that. But surveying your students, like Christina said there, I believe in step 2, super important. But you also got to ask the right questions if you want to get content that's going to be helpful. Well, how do you figure out what the right questions are? Again, talk to your target audience, talk to your current students, talk to your alumni. Because even what a 27-year-old who graduated 4 years ago or 5 years ago from your school told you, I promise is going to be applicable to somebody 7 and 8 years younger than them. They're going to go through a lot of the same life experiences if they choose to come to your school. Just utilizing the current student voice on a regular basis, not once or twice a year, not the perfect sounding quote, all right, with the standard picture that goes on your website that everybody has and every business has, is one of those ways, right, to be consistent and do kind of all together those steps that Christina talked about. A couple other things I want to throw by you. I've heard you say, all right, community is give and take. Expand on that for me.
The thing is that whenever you join a community, you understand that there's a general expectation of I'm going to come in here and I'm going to talk or I'm going to do things or I'm going to share. But what you're doing is, it's just like how a community would be if we were talking about a group of people coming together in the 1800s. They're going to work together. They're going to work collectively. They're stronger together. But there's going to be an expectation of I'm going to come in and I'm going to take these things. If it's a support community, I'm going to come in with my questions and I'm going to leave with answers. And so there's this natural give and take. The thing is that for a community to be successful and for someone to want to return is they need to be able to take more than they give. And so as a community builder, you have to understand what's motivating them and what their jobs to be done is in that community, and then make sure that you're providing more value than you're asking. You have to give more than you take, because it's just like with anyone. If I'm a friend with somebody and they're never there for me, but I'm always there for them, and they're always asking me for things, but whenever I need something, they can't be found, we're done. And that's the same thing with the community. It's the same thing. It all goes back to human relationships. So give more than you take. Understand that there are going to be people who are in the community for selfish reasons, and that's okay, as long as they are not taking so much that it takes away from other people's value in the community. But give and take is absolutely crucial.
And so from point one, those of you listening, this is why it's so important. And I talk about this all the time, and I've talked about it on other podcast episodes. How you communicate with your community and even prospective students from point one is so important, because the longer you wait to do all these things Christina and I have been talking about today, being genuine, being human, being empathetic, trying to understand their wants, needs, and fears, the harder it's going to become to get them to trust you and to want to buy into everything you're talking about. So what do you think some of the most effective ways are then? Like, colleges and universities love to throw around, Christina, and it's just like the business world, this phrase of, we have a welcoming community. Great. What does that mean to somebody? Like, how do you back up a statement like that in a way that resonates with an audience?
You need to be able to show them what that looks like. So if it's an online community, what's the onboarding process look like? How am I welcomed? Who is welcoming me? Am I told how to behave in certain places? Am I given guidelines as to how this works? Are you helping me determine where I can do whatever I need in the community? If it's in person, same thing for, like, especially for higher ed. Someone sets up a tour of campus. You have an entire process for that. There are guidelines as to what the tour guide's going to go over, what kind of questions they can expect to answer, all of those things. Same thing with the community. What is the standard operating procedure for someone who's joining the community? Because you can say that you're welcoming, and you might be welcoming to you, but that might not be enough for the person who's joining.
So what does a successful community look like then, Christina? So we've talked about how to build it. We've talked about why it's important, right? Like, if you're trying to define ROI, all right, I want to figure out that all of this work, was it useful? Did I prioritize the right things? How do you go about doing that?
Successful community for me, especially from a community member perspective, is that they come in, they're engaged, they feel safe, and they know what to do. They know how to use the community, they feel safe doing it, and they know that they can get the job that they want done. For the business, if it's related to a business, is what behaviors are they doing in the community? How does that reflect to a KPI in the business? So it could be, a lot of brands do it for support forums. Well, if there's questions in the support forums and other customers are able to help them, that's money we're saving, because that's revenue that we don't have to put towards support staff. It also means that because those people are getting questions answered, that they're not as frustrated anymore. So they're probably more likely to be retained as customers. So you really want to figure out, and that's why I think leadership doing the community canvas with you is so important, is you're going to learn very quickly what leadership expects them to do. And then based off of the goals that the business has, how do you align and figure out how they can feed each other? How can you find an intersection between what the community needs and what the brand needs so they can feed? That intersection is where the sweet spot is. And so that ROI looks different for certain people. It could be, I just want quotes. I just want customer quotes. Or I want people to prevent us from doing an ad campaign that's going to completely bomb because it has nothing to do or doesn't resonate with the target audience. The ROI looks different for different brands depending on what KPIs you're looking at and what your expectations for the community are. But that's what you're looking for, is that intersection.
What's your definition of brand?
I would say that a brand is, I use it interchangeably with business, just because in the internet world, everything has to have a brand. You have to be synonymous with something. So it's how how would your customers describe you? What words are they using when they're thinking about you? For HubSpot, we really want to be seen as friendly, and we're here to help. And you see that with the opportunities we have to connect with others, with HubSpot Academy, where you can learn, and even if you're not a customer. And so for me, I think that colleges and higher ed are brands too. It's just, do you know what your brand is? Do you know that you're associated with tailgates or party culture or like really esoteric departments, or you're known as an Ivy, or you're all of these things? There's an attachment to what that school is, whether it's correct or not. Same thing with companies. When I think of certain companies, I have certain adjectives that immediately spring to mind. Certain colors immediately spring to mind. And so that's what brand means to me.
So then, just listening to you speak, I got to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
If you define your brand and you actually do, we'll call it market research, and you have the people, again, who are experiencing it, your alums who have experienced it, tell you things, and 20 different companies, or in this example, 20 different colleges do it, and they all kind of get similar answers. How do you differentiate the brand in the way you present it then to the quote unquote consumer or prospective student?
You need to know what the strategic differences are. So why would they choose? So that's when you're going to ask students, why did you choose us over so-and-so? Especially if those other schools are on there. So what was the difference? Is it the dorms are nicer? Is it that it was cheaper? Is it that it's a better location? It's closer to the beach. It has a bigger football program. Whatever that looks like, you're going to, just like with any other business, you're going to look for the strategic differences. What makes you different than the other schools that they were looking at?
Christina, I've been ending every podcast doing a couple of quick fun things. And so we're going to do them together. The first one is a signature question that I've been asking every guest. So what's one important piece of advice that somebody at some point in your life is giving you that has really stuck to this day?
I did a podcast at a conference, I want to say it was like 5 years ago. And it was a panel of speakers, and one of them had said their advice. They answered this question, and I've stolen it ever since because it was so amazing. And it was, make them tell you no. I find a lot of people self-reject. They won't apply for jobs they want. They won't apply to speak at conferences. They won't do certain things because they just don't feel worthy. Make them tell you no.
That's a great piece of advice.
Yeah, I had to steal it.
No, hey, listen, all the best stuff is 100% stolen. You and I both know this. There's very things that are brand new and revolutionary.
Yes.
I get asked it all the time, but Jeremy, like, what is nobody doing? Yeah, there's very little of that.
Very little.
The key is all of the things that your target audience wants you to do, can you do them more consistently than like 98% of your competitors, right? That's as basic as that sounds, right? That would give so many people more of an advantage than they have. Yeah. Fun rapid fire is the last thing we do. So I'm just going to give you 3 or 4 quick questions, and I just want you to quickly give me first thoughts that come to mind, okay?
Sure.
Your dream vacation, where are you going?
I'm going to Florence with my husband.
Okay. Is that actually happening? It sounds like that may be in the works already.
In a couple years, yeah. I went in 2008 and wasn't able to go with him, but I went, and the whole time I was wishing that he'd been there because he's a huge art guy. So I love Scotland. I'd say Scotland for me, but I'll say Florence for him.
Awesome. Hardest skill to teach another marketer?
How to not overthink. We all overthink. Like it's like an Olympic skill we all have.
Marvel or DC? I know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyways.
Marvel, but honestly, I think I have to. There's caveats. I have favorites. Like I love the Batman universe. Batgirl's my absolute favorite. But Feige turned the tide for me.
Okay. And your favorite Foo Fighters song, because as I can see in your background, you're clearly a Foo Fighters fan, is?
I'm going to say Wheels. I love Wheels.
Okay. Awesome.
It's a deep cut for some people.
I was going to say, as somebody who likes Foo Fighters, but is probably not, as deep a fan as you are, I'm not familiar with that one.
You need to listen to it. I love all of them.
Rope would be one of my favorites.
Rope is great. I love Rope. Yeah.
If anybody wants to get a hold of you, Christina, obviously they can follow you on Twitter at @ChristinaG, but how else can people ultimately get a hold of you, whether it's to learn more about HubSpot or just to, bounce some stuff off you if you're willing to do that with other people?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Christina Garnett. You can find me. I'm on TikTok, but I'm not trying to be a TikToker, so there's not anything crazy there. Instagram, same thing. I'm not trying to do anything there. Twitter's my favorite. So if you want the more professional side of me, head over to LinkedIn. If you want to know what a nerd I am, head over to Twitter.
And we'll link in the editing notes. You'll see, obviously, Christina's Twitter feed and bio, and I encourage you to follow her. I do, and I get a ton just from not only what she posts, but obviously all of the things that she's sharing amongst the community, right, that she has helped build. Thank you very much for sharing so much with us today, Christina.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mission Admissions with Jaime Tears. If you like this episode, do us a huge favor and hit that follow and subscribe button below. Furthermore, if you've got just 2 minutes to spare, we would greatly appreciate you leaving a rating and a review of this show on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. But Enrollify is far more than just a podcast network. Enrollify is where higher ed comes to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're a growing learning community of 4,000 members, and we'd love to welcome you into the fold. You can access our free blog articles, newsletters, e-courses, and more, or purchase our master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery at enrollify.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and welcoming you into the community. Again, you can subscribe for free at enrollify.org.